Hello, everyone. This is the 113th episode of the Soccer Nostalgia Talk podcast. As always, this is Sean from Los Angeles and the Soccer Nostalgia blog. Unfortunately, Mr. Paul Whittle from the 1888 letter blog could not make it this time. For this episode, I welcome back German sports journalist and author Mr. Nils Suling and German journalist Mr. Christoph Bähr as we continue the second part on the discussion of the Otto Rehhagel era as Werder Bremen manager, this time from 1988 to 1995. Mr. Suling is a sports journalist, writer, book author, media consultant, media advisor, content creator, and communication for athletes and brands. He is the US correspondent for BILD, BILD DE, BILD TV, Sport BILD, BILD am SONNTAG, and WELT in Germany. And he's the author of Wir Helden von Rom, which is the book chronicling the 1990 World Cup victory in Italy. Mr. Bähr is a journalist for the Bremen-based newspaper Weser-Kurier. Welcome back to both of you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Nils.
Last time we left off in 1988 with Otto Rehhagel finally leading Werder Bremen to the Bundesliga title. Now let's discuss this first post-Bundesliga title season of 1988-89. There would be progress in terms of the Champions Cup, and in the DFB Pokal, Bremen reached the final. It would be the first of three straight final for Werder Bremen. As far as transfers, there was not much activity. Dieter Bordensky joined Swedish side AIK Solna, and Matthias Rolander joined Borussia Dortmund. As far as players coming in, we have the Norwegian midfielder Vegard Skogheim, but he would not make much of an impression. Certainly not the same way as Bradseth did.
It's a season which is obviously easily forgotten. I had to look it up because Werder didn't win the title in that season. It was like the season of 88 was like such a great season, the first title after more than 20 years. And yeah, but when I read about the season 88, 89, I came across the quarterfinal in the Champions Cup. If you look at those two matches against AC Milan, you have to say Milan at that time was really the strongest team in Europe. After that, in the semi-final, they beat Real Madrid with 5-0. So, and Werder was really close to making it to the next round. It was the 0-0 at the Weserstadion, and they lost at Italy with 1-0 just because of a penalty, which was, I don't know if it was really a penalty. I mean, I didn't watch the match at that time, but I talked to Gunnar Sauers several times, and he was the player who made the foul before the penalty. And he always said that he was fouled. Everybody thought it was a free kick for Werder. And then the ref gave a penalty for AC Milan, and that's why they lost that match. So although they didn't make it to the semifinal, I think this was a really, really, really strong team to play against. And Werder was on one level with AC Milan. So I think that's easily forgotten when you talk about that season because it wasn't that spectacular. They finished third place in Bundesliga, which was, for the champion, it was okay. They lost the DFB Pokal final, which was a disappointment, but it was a really strong season at Europe, I think.
You stole my intro. You stole my intro. It was like an easily forgotten season. It is like really the same. I remember watched the cup finals when they lost like 4-1 against Dortmund. And Norbert Dickel scored 2 times, and Norbert Dickel just barely made it to the game because he had such a bad knee injury, and nobody was expecting that he will score, and he scored twice. That was terrible. But I remember one thing in that season, Christoph, correct me, but it was the game against Dynamo Ost-Berlin, right? BFC Dynamo?
Yes, another Wander of Weser. Yeah.
Legendary. So they lost in Berlin, and it was like as you said, one of the miracles, wonders of the Weser. They lost in Berlin, and they were like, it was a miracle. And then Berlin came to Bremen, and Willy Lemke, the technical director at that time, he invited the whole team of BSC Dynamo to go to a warehouse and buy electronics and jeans and whatever. So that he kind of like set the focus away from the game. So they were like all happy that they got discounts, and for them it was hard. In Eastern Germany at that time, you didn't get much. If you want to get something in the supermarket, you had to stand in line for a long time to get something. And so therefore it was like great for them to play in the West. That was one big thing that Werder like kind of like manipulated the head of the Berlin players. And then also the legendary, now I have to think, it was Burgsmüller, I think. So they got out of the locker room, and Burgsmüller passed. He slammed at the door of the Berlin team, of the Berlin side, and he yelled like, "Come on, you cowards. We're going to beat you." And that, in retro perspective, is just like such a big thing that they think that scared a little bit the other side. So, and then Bremen won 5-0 and was like a legend.
Yeah. And let's remind everyone, Bremen had lost the first leg 3-0.
3-0 in Berlin. No chance. Everybody who saw that game or who was there later, I read in one of these famous magazines of the German sports journalist Oliver Wurm. He makes great things. Whoever watched it, look it up. Fußballgold.de. It's Oliver Wurm, great guy. So, and people were talking about how arrogant the Bremen guys were and how like it was a hard game in Berlin, and they lost. And but thankfully they beat them, and then they got AC Milan. And when Christoph mentioned that, I peeked at the squad. It was Van Basten, Rijkaard, Gullit, Ancelotti, Donadoni. I mean, come on, that's
Baresi, Maldini.
Creme de la creme. And Bremen only lost by like a questionable penalty. So a great season. Only these two games. The rest, let's forget about that.
And let's remind everyone that it's still the backbone of the previous season. As far as the squad, we still have Oliver Reck in goal, Uli Borovka, the Norwegian Rune Bratseth, Michael Kutsup, Johnny Otten, Gunnar Sauer, Thomas Schaff in defense, Dieter Eels, Günther Hemmen, Norbert Meyer, and Mirko Votava, Thomas Wolter. Up front, you have Burgsmüller, who at this point, he would be 38, 39, I believe, this season.
At least, I think 54.
And as well as Frank Neubarth, Frank Ordenewitz, and Karl-Heinz Redler, who would make the West German national team this season. And remember the famous header he scored against Holland later in the season. Satisfactory season, but I guess not the same heights as the previous season. We come to the 1989-90 season. Once more, there was progress in Europe in the UEFA Cup, where Werder Bremen reached all the way to the semifinals. However, in the West German Cup final, they lost again in the final, this time to Kaiserslautern. In the league, they did not do so well. They finished 7th and missed out on Europe for the first time in nearly a decade. As far as arrivals, you have defender Manfred Bokenfeld arriving from Waldorf Mannheim. You also have the midfielder Uwe Hartgen, who moved up from the youth team of Werder Bremen, as well as the New Zealand striker Vinton Rufe, who arrived from Grasshopper Zurich. As far as departures, Frank Ordenewitz joined Köln, and later in the season, Norbert Meyer joined Borussia Mönchengladbach. But the real takeaway from this season is the UEFA Cup run. That includes victories against Maradona's Napoli.
Yes. I was there. My soccer coach at that time, he had 2 tickets for that game. And me and my best friends, Matti and Svenne, we tried to, who's going to go with him? So I think we pulled like matchsticks or something. So I won and I was there. And exactly the only memory I have of that season, because the rest of the season was, I don't know. In Bundesliga, they were terrible. I think at one point they fall back on the 12th place. So they were really bad. They struggled away always in these years. They had problems away. But in the UEFA Cup, it was so different. And then Maradona came, and Maradona is like amazing. Just like to watch him and see him and what his pre-match routine is, I mean, look all up the videos on YouTube, what he's doing before the games, just like juggling with the chewing gum and all these things. But he played against Uli Borowka in that game, I think. And Uli Borowka had the nickname the Iron Foot. And you know, when your nickname is the Iron Foot, you know he can kick some legs. So he made it really hard. And I think they won in Napoli.
Yes, 3-2.
3-2 and then 5-1 in Bremen. So it was like celebrating all day long. They had a great team too at that time. Was it?
Yeah, they won the Scudetto that season, Napoli.
With Alemão and
Careca.
Awesome team. And Bremen was great in that season, but at the end, you stand there with nothing. You lose against Kaiserslautern, which was a big upset. At that time, you didn't know that Kaiserslautern will win the championship next year. But at that point, you thought like you lose against like somebody who finished like 12 or 13 in the league. Yeah, then you can beat Maradona, but you don't win it.
Juventus, they defeated Fiorentina in the final.
Okay.
Who had eliminated Werder in the semifinals.
Oh, I don't
Werder lost only on away goals to Fiorentina. Yeah, it was 0-0 and a 1-1, so it was quite close. You have to say at that season, after the loss in the cup final against Kaiserslautern, Otto Rehhagel and the board of the club, they met after that, and Rehhagel offered to resign because he obviously had the feeling that maybe he was too long at the club, or there was like it didn't really move on. Yeah, they lost the second cup final in a row, so he offered to leave Werder, of course. All the officials, like the president Böhmert, and so they said no, you have to stay at Bremen. So, which was the right decision, as we know today. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at this point that he really offered to resign, you see that was quite, like Nils said. Also compared to today, it was not that bad. Yeah, they made it to the semifinal in the UEFA Cup, which is quite a big thing. But yeah, at that time it was seen as a disappointing season.
Was there a feeling that Rehhagel's side, in terms of average age, they were older than most other sides?
I looked it up actually, and there weren't that old people. Burgsmüller was 40, by the way, in that season. And he's, I think, older than you, Christoph, right? How old are you?
I'm 41 now.
Oh, man. Okay, you still could play Bundesliga at that age.
Yes.
Burgsmüller did. So Mirko Botava was 34, Kutzov was 35, and the rest was under 30. So it's like not that you think like it's just like a bunch of people from retirement home playing there. And I think that is the perspective of people who say like they were older, because they didn't much change in the squad over the years. So it was always the core, and Otto Rehhagel got like this and that changed, but it was not like when you now look at teams, they changed like 7-8 players. And at that time, other teams hired a lot too. Bayern Munich, for example, they always had like 5 to 8 new players, and Bremen only had little adjustments in the squad. So I think that is like easily mistaken in, oh, it's always the same and they're all too old. I mean, they were still successful, and Christoph said compared to nowadays, Bremen is now like somewhere down the field, but it was at least like in a very experienced squad. Let's call it that way.
I think the thing is that success wasn't there. It was always said like the team is too old, and Rehhagel with his old players like Burgsmüller and Votava, and later on, it was a year later that Klaus Allofs came with 33 or 34. So, but you don't have to forget that there were also younger players in the team, which came up from their own youth teams like Dieter Eils, Thomas Schaaf, and Thomas Wolter, and so on. Actually, it was quite a good mixture, but of course they had this season where they kind of stagnated and lost the cup final. So there was criticism, and at that point there was always somebody who said the team is too old. And of course, you look at some players like Burgsmüller, they were old, but there were also younger players on the team.
One time I was traveling with the Bremen team in the beginning of the 2000s, and we were at the airport and at the pass control. And so I was talking to the goalkeeper at that time, Frank Rost. And then the border guy just waved us through. And I was like, okay, I'm coming with him. So I walked with the whole team through, and nobody checked our passports. We just walked in, and all the journalists and fans were standing in line, had to show up. So people start yelling, why is he allowed to go in there? And then the custom officers turn around like, look at him, he's Dieter Eils. So he completely mistook me with Dieter Eils at that place. I mean, it's a little bit my hairline. I see that.
That season, the likes of Marco Bode and Andre Wiedner and even Oliver Freund made their debuts. I think Oliver Freund only played one match that season. So younger players were coming through, but like you said, it was perceived to be an experienced side with very little change. We come to the 1990-91 season. There would be progress in the league, and Bremen would finally win the DFB Pokal after reaching it for the third straight season. But there was still a feeling that perhaps Werder Bremen are no longer a title winning side. Like you mentioned, the only arrival was the 33 or 34-year-old former Dusseldorf Köln striker and West Germany captain Klaus Allofs. He came from Bordeaux after winning the title of Olympique Marseille. The players who left included the significant loss of Karl-Heinz Riedler to the Italian Serie A to Lazio, as well as Michael Kutsop, who retired. Third place finish, winning the DFB Pokal against Köln, but it doesn't look like the title is a possibility anymore.
Not for me. No, at that time, it was, I mean, we talked about it last time. At that time, it was always like, the stable was like Bayern Munich was always a contender. But Bremen was still had a good team and good squad, and over the years it hadn't changed much to the championship team of '88. So I think it is hard to say, like in that season, I think the DFB Pokal was like a band-aid on the last seasons, just like after you miss some things. And of course, when you once win the championship, you lick the blood and want to have more. So it was too balanced on the top of the league. So it was, you could easily end up fifth and you still were one of the better teams in the Bundesliga. So it was, I wouldn't say it was not a title winning side, but it was hard to reach the top level because other teams invested some money, Bayern Munich always. And then, but the cup final, even if you won by penalty shootout with a little bit of luck after, I think like Pierre Lebarski slipped because the grass was so wet, so he missed his penalty. I would call it a successful season.
Yes, that's what I would say as well. So I remember the season. I was like 7 or 8 years old, so it was the first season I really remember watching some matches on TV and so on. And of course, I remember it as a success because there was the cup win at the end. And I think it was just important to win a title after 2 lost cup finals, and everybody was afraid that like if we lose this 3rd cup final in a row, we are like the idiots for everyone. I think it would have been the first time in history, like a team losing 3 cup finals in a row. So it was very close against Cologne, but they won on penalties, and that was a big success at that time.
Yeah, so Rehhagel won the domestic league title and the cup title now in his collection. Let's discuss the 1991-92 season and ultimate triumph in Europe in the Cup Winners' Cup. In fact, I discussed this European run with another Werder Bremen fan in an interview with Mr. Hanno Buchner. Let's look at the entire season overall. Domestically, unfortunately, it would be a disappointing season as Werder finished in the 9th place. Also, let's remember, this was the first season that the former East German sides were reintegrated into the Bundesliga. So it was a longer season with more teams, I think 20 teams that season in the Bundesliga. As far as the transfer activity, again, not many changes. You have Oliver Freund leaving to join Hanover. As far as players coming in, you have a double signing from Bochum, Stefan Kohn, the striker, and midfielder Thorsten Legat, and a striker, K. Venschlag, arrived from Rotation Berlin. As far as the European run that they finally won, they defeated Monaco in the final. This is the Monaco of Arsene Wenger. Some familiar faces like Georges Weah, Yuri Zhorkaev, among others. Along the way, they defeated Belgian side Club Brugge, Galatasaray, and Hungarian side Ferencváros. Disappointment at home, but a European trophy, I imagine, more than made up for it.
What a legendary year. It's like one of my fondest memories. It's this win in Lisbon where they played Monaco. And you just named a few, and they had Djorkaeff, Thuram, Petit. I mean, that was like an awesome team, and didn't expect Bremen to win. It was just like, oh, great, we made it. Great. It was like the feeling for me too as a fan at that time. And I remember watching it with my friends, and it was like, oh yeah, we made it. It's fun. But just like enjoy. And then when you see that game, and I watched the goals a few nights ago, I don't know why I stumbled over them, and just like how great it was, just like out of nowhere, suddenly Klaus Allofs scored. And you were like, oh my gosh. And then Klaus Allofs passed like deep into the other field, and Kiwi Wintenrufer, nicknamed Kiwi because he's from New Zealand, circled around the goalkeeper and kicked it in. And suddenly you won, and you were like on top of Europe, even if you're not the champions, Europapokal, but like cup winners. And it was a great memory, and it gave like such a boost. And we will come to that later, because now it was the start of like very successful times. First the German Cup, then the Europapokal. It was, for me, one of the best things at that time. Like one of my greatest memories with Werder Bremen.
Like putting Klaus Allofs in the starting 11 for the final, nobody expected that. It was one of those great ideas from Otto Rehhagel. Like, I think it was Kiwi Rufo who said Klaus Allofs didn't have a knee or something. Like it was, so after every training, his knee was like hurting, and there were water in the knee, and there was water on the knee and so on. So nobody really expected him to play from the beginning. And then he played, and he scored the first goal, and he gave the assist for the second goal. It was like, yeah, I mean, what was a great idea by the coach. As you said, Sharon, the season at the Bundesliga was quite disappointing. I mean, at one point they lost to Stuttgarter Kickers and at home, and some Werder fans were even shouting Uwe. They referred to Uwe Reinders, the former player who was now a coach and was fired at Hansa Rostock a couple of weeks before. So they wanted him as the new coach and wanted Rehhagel to leave. So, but nobody's talking about that anymore, because they won the European Cup. That what counts. 9th place in the league. Everybody has forgotten about that, yeah.
I want to add one thing to Allofs and Rufer. I remember once reading it. Must be the day before the game in Lisbon. Otto Rehhagel said, like, okay, Klaus Allofs going to play. And Wintenrufer was so surprised that he called his dad and told him, Dad, he let that Allofs guy play. We're going to lose. He has only one knee. So it's like that he didn't expect that to happen. And then next day, they both are the biggest match winners. Such an awesome story.
And Rehhagel said one reason why Allofs played was that he played at France the years before, and he was very good at speaking French, so he wanted him to understand what the Monaco players were saying on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think Rehhagel also mentioned that he wanted experienced players for this type of a match, and that's why he trusted Allofs for this type of a setting, and he was proven right ultimately. This victory in the Cup Winners' Cup, like you said, would be a boost for the following season, 1992-93 season, where they would win the Bundesliga title once more, just ahead of Bayern Munich at the end. So for this season, you have the Austrian midfielder Andras Herzog coming from Rapid Vienna. You have former Hamburg defender Dietmar Biersdorfer, who had one cap for Germany. He arrived from Hamburg. And you also have Hans-Jürgen Gundelach coming as a backup goalkeeper from FC Homburg. Later in the season, you have Bernd Hopsch coming over from Lokomotiv Leipzig. And the players who left included backup goalkeeper Jürgen Rollmann, who joined Duisburg. Veteran defender Johnny Otten joined Oldenburg. Marinus Bester, a little used forward, joined Hamburg. And later in the season, also Günther Hemmen left and joined Wattenscheid. As far as Europe, Werder Bremen were eliminated in the second round by Sparta Prague. They also played in the UEFA Super Cup against Barcelona's dream team and lost there. It was the Bundesliga that they regained after 5 seasons.
It was a terrible start into the season. I think after 3 match days, they were on the bottom of the league. You could call it another miracle or wonder of the Weser, because then after that they moved on, and on the 32nd match day they took over. Until then, only Bayern Munich was on top. But I think Bremen beat HSV, Hamburger SV, which was the arch rival, and that was a big thing. And then the last game they beat Stuttgart, Christoph.
Yes, 3-0 at Stuttgart. Yes.
And so Bernd Hopsch scored, and that was a key asset that you got Bernd Hopsch in the transfer period to as an add-on in the front. And you mentioned like two of my favorite players. Dietmar Beiersdorfer, I had his jersey at that time, so I loved him. And Andy Herzog is still very in my heart, and I am very thankful that he even helped me with my book. He was one of the guys who helped me with my book, so he's still like a great guy to me, and he was like a big asset in that time too, in that team.
I had a Beiersdorfer jersey as well. Like some years later, when every player got his own number, I guess he had the number 12, and that's a jersey I had at that time. So great defender, and of course Andy Herzog. Don't have to say anything. It was extraordinary player.
We mentioned how in the previous seasons Werder Bremen were stagnating domestically. Was this 1993 triumph completely unexpected?
Yes, it was unexpected. Nobody really thought they could win the league, and like Nils said, they were at the bottom of the table at the beginning. I think the team had to find itself. We already talked about it was always kind of the same team playing every year. Now they had some new players, which was at that time, well, not so many, but at that time was quite a big change for Werder. It was Dietmar Beiersdorfer, who was a player for the starting 11. Andy Herzog should become the central player, but yeah, they had to find it. Andy Herzog came from Austria. He had to adapt to the Bundesliga, which is like a bit faster. The game is faster there, so they just needed a couple of weeks, a couple of matches, and then the season really started, and then it was just a great season.
It was a great year. Also a great year. I did high school at that year, so it was a great year.
We come to the 1993-94 season. Werder Bremen's first participation in the Champions League group phase. We also have the second DFB Pokal win against Rot-Weiß Essen, and of course that match against Anderlecht, another wonder of Weser. Domestically, Werder Bremen did poorly that season. They would finish 9th. As far as transfer activity, Mario Basler arrived from Hertha Berlin. As far as departures, Stefan Kohn joined Köln, and Klaus Allofs also retired. So again, not much change from the previous season. They fell off the pace domestically. However, in Europe, they were in a group with the great AC Milan, who would eventually win the Champions League that season, Porto, and Anderlecht.
I mean, you have to say the Champions League was different then. The group stage was like the quarterfinal. So Werder was among the best 8 teams in Europe. They had to win 2 rounds before to make it to the group stage. And like you said, they had that great match against Anderlecht. They played 1-1 against Milan at Bremen. But they didn't manage to make it to the semifinal, which was a bit disappointing because they had to win against Porto in the last match. And then it was a 5-0 for Porto, which was, I remember I watched it being on holidays in Spain, and we were searching for a bar, which my father and me were searching for a bar where we could watch the match. And we found a bar and were really happy that we could watch the match there. And then it was just a disaster. They had no chance at all. It was like against Anderlecht the first half where they were 3-0 down, but against Porto it was 90 minutes of that. So there were no wonder or something. They just lost it. And yeah, that was disappointing. The Bundesliga was also quite disappointing, but at least they won the cup. So the season was okay.
I remember I had tickets, so they sold for Champions League. You could buy a bundle. So I had tickets for all 3 games. And I remember the Milan game, me and my friends had the idea we want to set up a record in eating bratwurst. And so I ate 10 bratwurst at that game. with mustard and a bun. I remember that. I felt terrible next day. I think even next morning, whew, I had like a brick in my stomach. And then the Anderlecht game is another. I was there, and it was like people got up next to me and were so disappointed. They were back like 0-3. People were moving out of the stadium, and me and my friends were just like, "No, you can't go. Maybe something's going to happen." And then word is that Rune Bratzett went into the locker room and was so mad that he grabbed a full cup of like a beverage, like I don't know if it was water or some other things, and he threw it against the wall. And he barely almost hit Otto Rehhagel because he hit the wall right next to Otto Rehhagel. But that was like where people say afterwards that that was the kickoff to that Hello Wake moment, that they could see like, hey, wait, we can do something. And then they talked in the halftime about the past wonders, miracles of the Weser. And and then suddenly they turned the game and won 5-3, and it was an awesome game. And I think the last 15 minutes, nobody was sitting, everybody was standing. And at least in that game, I didn't eat as many bratwursts as in the other game. So I felt quite okay at that time. Into the cup finals too, but that was an easy gig because it was Rot-Weiß Essen, and they were second Bundesliga, and there was not a single minute where you thought that Bremen's going to lose it.
Against Anderlecht, a lot of fans left the stadium, and they all came back when they heard that there was something happening inside. Yeah. So but you stayed at the stadium, Nils, and
I was
saw
there.
them. You saw them all coming back in, or?
No, actually, not where we were actually.
Okay.
So we had a whole row for ourselves. I don't remember that, but yeah, I guess some came back. Yes, I read that, but I didn't see that. I was like focused on the field.
But every Werder fan has something about that match against Anderlecht. I was 10 years old. I was begging my parents that I wanted to watch the match, and they said it's school the next day. It's very late in the evening, so on. But then they said, okay, you're allowed to watch it. So we turned on the TV, and it was like 3-0 at halftime, and they said Werder will lose it anyway, so come on, go to bed. You won't be that tired the next morning at school. And I said, okay, I go to bed. But I'm really grateful, still very grateful, that my father turned on the video recorder and pushed the record button. And so he woke me up the next morning a bit earlier than usual and said, come on, you have to watch this. And I was like, why? Why do you want me to watch like Werder losing 5-0, 6-0? I wasn't really expecting that there was something happening like that. And so he, turned on the TV, turned on the video, and I was watching the 5 goals. I couldn't believe it. I went to school and was like so happy in the morning. It was one of the best school days, I think.
Yeah, and let's remember, Werder Bremen scored 3 goals in just the last 10 minutes to overturn the result. Now let's discuss Otto Rehhagel's final season in charge, the 1994-95 season. It could have ended fittingly with another Bundesliga title. But Bremen lost on the last day in a very dramatic fashion. As far as the transfer activity, we have young Russian striker Vladimir Beschasnich coming from Spartak Moscow, Egyptian defender Hani Ramzi arriving from Neuchâtel Xamax, and international defender Michael Schulz arriving from Dortmund. As far as the players who left, Thorsten Legat joined Eintracht Frankfurt, Uwe Hartgen joined Hanover, Manfred Bockenfeld joined FC Bocholt, and later in the season, Vinton Rufe joined the J-League club Jeff United. As far as Europe, they were eliminated in the second round of the Cup Winners' Cup to Feyenoord. It was the Bundesliga run and their neck-to-neck battle with Borussia Dortmund that ended on the final day, and that loss against Bayern Munich. We have to mention, well, before the end of the season, I believe Rehhagel had declared that he would be leaving that season, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was the whole season was, or the second part of the season was shaped by Rehhagel and his plan to go to Bayern Munich. I think it was at the beginning of 1995 when those rumors came up, and like in February or so, it was announced that he would leave at the end of the season. And at first, everybody was shocked. But then you have to say it was like a talk to Dieter Eils about that. It was like he said it was kind of an extra motivation for the team because they wanted their coach, which they still appreciated, where they had won all those titles with. So they wanted him to leave with a title, and that was like kind of motivation to win the league. And that's why Werder played a very strong second part of the season and still managed to make it even on the first place and overtake Dortmund. But yeah, as you said, on the last day, they lost against Bayern Munich, Rehhagel's new team, which was like really special situation. And yeah, Dortmund won its match, and so the title went to Dortmund.
I want to add something about the rumors. So I read a very interesting article the last days, and I want to give Christoph the chance to tell the story because it was his article about the rumors when it spreaded that Otto Rehhagel was maybe connected with Bayern Munich. He went to a theater play and watched with his wife a theater play. And Christoph, you remember your story?
Yes, sure. I looked it up in the archive. Like he went to the theater quite regularly. The theater at the Goetheplatz in Bremen. Yeah, he loved to watch the theater. And when all those rumors were around, like he might leave Werder and he might go to Munich, he came to the theater, and all the people in there, they stood up and applauded when he entered the room. The people were not angry or something. They just tried to convince him to stay at Bremen, to stay at Werder, and to not leave. And there were also some. Werder got a lot of letters, even poems from fans, and they all tried to convince Rehhagel not to go to Bayern Munich and to stay at Bremen. So at the matches there were like banners and something. So it felt like the whole city wanted him to stay, but yeah, he didn't care. Unfortunately, he left anyway. That was a real big thing because it was like Werder Bayern was a big rivalry at the time. Yeah, they always fought for the title, and it was like Willy Lemke, the manager, and Uli Hoeneß, they were like enemies. Yeah, Lemke always said, yeah, we're the poor Werder Bremen, and there's the rich Bayern Munich, and Uli Hoeneß didn't like that, and so on. There were a lot of arguments going on, and then Rehhagel went to that team, to the biggest enemy, as you can say, and the officials at Werder, like Willy Lemke, the president Böhmert, they were left in the dark. They didn't know anything. There were those rumors going around, and the papers were writing about it, but they didn't know anything. And Franz Böhmert, the president, was on holidays in Florida, in the US, when all those things happened. So he couldn't even do anything. I mean, it was before the internet. I mean, there were probably some cell phones, but most of the people didn't have one, so he couldn't do anything. So he just came back from his holidays. At the airport in Bremen, there were several journalists waiting for him, and he told them, so the thing is not over. I will fight for Rehhagel to stay at Werder, but he didn't know that the deal was already done, so he couldn't do anything, and Rehhagel wanted to leave. And also officials at Werder, they were really, really disappointed by that. And they even thought about firing Rehhagel at once and making his assistant Kali Kamp the new chef coach till the end of the season. But then after a few days, they kind of thought about it and they said, okay, we let him finish the season and so on. But you have to imagine the whole city of Bremen and all the fans and even all the people who were kind of a bit interested in Werder, there was just those one topic, Rehhagel leaving Werder, and not only leaving Werder, going to Bayern Munich. It was like going on several months. The whole city was in excitement, yeah.
After 14 successful seasons, Otto Rehhagel had left his post. As credible challengers to Bayern Munich, do you think Otto Rehhagel changed the landscape of German football from the 70s, where it was really Hamburg and Mönchengladbach they were challenging Bayern, into this new era of the 1980s and 90s?
Yes, surely. He did. They did together. And like last time when we talked about it, it's big achievement for Otto Rehhagel, but also the whole leading of the club, like technical director or manager, Willy Lemke. In Germany, we say manager. Willy Lemke, Franz Böhmert, the president, Klaus-Dieter Fischer, the vice president, Manfred Müller, who was like the financial guy. They were like really in charge, and they were the key factors, like from the club side, that it was such a big change. Yeah, it was. Bremen was at one point they grew from like this underdog to like a contender. And at that time, so you have in Germany, people love Bayern Munich or hate Bayern Munich. So it is like, it's normal. But in Germany, you have rarely people who hate Werder Bremen. It's just like because of that time, because they played like a successful games. And even if you ask now like younger players, Toni Kroos, for example, from Real Madrid, he loves Werder Bremen because he grew up with them. So that is like another thing, like they were like very, very, very lovable. And I think that still keeps Bremen like always. Everybody loved them. It was nice. And it was because Otto Rehhagel played like a very interesting football, very strong defense, but very fast attacks and always with surprises. And then all the successes, of course, it made them. And over the years, and it started at that time, and Bremen was until the 2000s, like still one of the big contenders until the last years it went downhill.
Otto Rehhagel was successful in building and recreating teams or rebuilding teams. Was this his greatest strength in integrating new players, young or old?
Yes, I would say that was one of his most big strengths. Like I already said, he always found the right mixture between younger players, older players. And what you have to say, he needed some time to build those teams. Like he was successful at clubs which did not have many stars and did not have much money. So he had time to build up a team. There was a bit of a patience. Like we said, Werder needed some time to win the first league title. They needed some time to win the first German Cups. They also needed some time to win the European Cup. Before that, they were in the quarterfinal of the Champions Cup and the semifinal of the UEFA Cup. So they always needed some time. And he didn't have the time later at Bayern Munich, but he needs that time to build a team. And when he gets those time, he's really clever and he has a good eye for players. He really knows what kind of players he needs. Like nobody could understand why you have to buy or to get Klaus Allofs, who was, as we said, like 33, or Manny Burgsmuller was almost 40. But he just knew they would fit into the team and they would help the team at that certain point. So yeah, and what he already did, he like created a kind of atmosphere of family. Like he was kind of a father for the players. That's what several players said. He always stood in front of the team, tried to protect the players. It was kind of us against them. There we are the team, and on the other side, there's the media, there are the other clubs. And that was kind of creating a really motivation and like an inner strength of those team. And even the players' wives were involved, like Rehhagel's wife, Beate. They often organized something for the players' wives. So it was kind of a big family. That's what several players say. That was something special about Werder Bremen under Otto Rehhagel. He had the right players, he had the right mixture, he created the right atmosphere, and he also had a clear style of play, which was those, like Nils said, they were strong at the defense, but they didn't only play defensively. They played quite attractive football, but they were always strong at the defense. That was the background. That's why they won titles.
I think it was also, and to add on what Christoph said, is so that he, like Christoph said, like he was like a father to the team. And one point was he chose the players by meeting them ahead several times and to get them to know like personally, like to see the soccer player on one side, but also see the person, the human, the family man or whatever. So into all these meetings, he brought his wife. So his wife Beate was always with them, and they invited then the wife of the players or the girlfriend. So it was kind of like from the beginning a very, very familiar setup and situation. And then Beate was also a big advisor to him, and she helped him with like judging, like, hey, he will fit good into your team. Or like I remember stories where players were kind of like, not on Otto's good side. But then his wife told him like, hey, give him some time, or try this. And it turned out that she was kind of like his secret assistant coach. And they did something in these years, which nowadays you think like Jürgen Klopp chooses his team also like by, oh yeah, I judge the people. But at that time, it was something which was very new and rare.
Looking at the Bundesliga titles, the 1988 and the 1993, how would you compare and contrast these two titles?
That's a good question. It's like I looked at the team actually a few days ago and just like had the idea like, wait, how many players from that time made it to the other time? And it was still a bunch. I wrote it down on my notes. It's like Rek, Borovka, Bratzett, Sharp, Sauer, Eils, Votava, Wolter, Neubart. So you see, on one hand, it feels like the core was there and some assets changed. It's always, I mean, it's 5 years, but like still so many players won the title twice in that time, shows that they continue with what they build up. They didn't like gambled much. They tried to build a team and added at points where they needed something. I don't even think like when the two teams would play against each other, I don't know. My feeling is a little bit the 1993 team would be a little bit better, but maybe that's because I'm in love with Andy Herzog.
I would say they would probably play 0-0 because I also think they are really similar. They played similar style of play, like we said, like a solid defense. In 88, they conceded 22 goals. In 93, it was 30 goals, which is also not as many. So, and they had strong strikers, like in 88, it was Kalle Riedli. In 93, it was Winton Rufer. Really similar teams, like Nils said. I didn't even know that so many players won both titles in 88 and 93. So, I mean, the biggest difference, obviously, is that in 88, most of the players hadn't won anything. It was the first title. And in 93, they had won several titles, and it was like maybe their third or fourth title for many players. So it was a more experienced team, but in several ways, the teams were quite similar, I guess.
In closing, what is the legacy of Otto Rehhagel in the history of German football?
He's for sure one of the greatest coaches ever have been to the Bundesliga. So I think he is like, if you have to name his name in the same sentence as, I think, Weisweiler, Lattek, Hitzfeld, Heinkes, Rehhagel. I think these are the biggest. You can argue that, oh yeah, later Pep Guardiola came, but these people were like dominating the Bundesliga for such a long time, over years, as players, some, and some as coaches. So I think his legacy is with Bremen, would like be successful in Bremen. Even if he failed with Bayern Munich and got fired, he came back with Kaiserslautern. I mean, he won the championship with Kaiserslautern. They came up from second Bundesliga and won the championship because he built up a team kind of like a little bit with his Bremen touch. And that was special too. And I mean, I told you, I met him in person, and he's a really, really likable man, but he's also like one of the greatest coaches of all time, I think.
If you support a team which is not Bayern Munich, like a team which maybe is not one of the biggest teams, which has not so much money and so on, you dream of winning titles anyway. So, and Rehhagel was somebody who could make this dream true. Like he came with Werder from the second division, he came with Kaiserslautern from the second division, and he made those teams one of the best teams in the Bundesliga, and he won titles with, you could say, underrated teams. Yeah, he was capable of building teams with players which were sometimes even forgotten or which were not stars before, and with quite, Werder was not poor at that time, but they didn't have as much money as Bayern Munich. So, and he managed still to win all those titles, and that's kind of just a wonderful story. Like, I mean, nowadays it's become rare that such teams would be like, I don't know, today, like if you would say that maybe a team like Mönchengladbach or so would win the Bundesliga today, yeah. And at that time it was possible, and that's what you want to see as a football fan, yeah, that every team is capable of winning something, and that's what Rehhagel did at Kaiserslautern, at Bremen, and at Greece later on as well, yeah.
Greece, I mean, don't forget about that. He won European Championship with Greece.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Crazy, even with the great Angelos Charisteas, the striker who played in Bremen too later. But I mean, come on, with Greece. So that is like a sign where you say like, hey, that is his legacy too.
With that, I would like to thank both of you for your participation in these two interviews. It was a fascinating discussion. I learned a lot from people who were there at the time with their inside knowledge. So thank you once again. As always, feel free to leave questions and comments All our respective contact information and the link to Mr. Suling's book are listed on the blog and podcast uploads. So thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.